Tim Walz is asked about, of course, all of this. Let's listen to Timmy.
Yeah.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
No, it's a bad response.
First of all, he's
without answering the question.
Well, I mean, did I misunderstand, or is he basically saying, did he say we are a generous state and we're very well run?
And
because
that's why
of that,
it attracts fraud.
yes. It's like,
Maybe your
I'm sorry, excuse
fraud
me?
is overly generous to the fraudsters, and you should handle your fraud problem, Tim. Also, when he said, yeah, I'll take responsibility for putting people in jail, it's like, no, the buck stops with you. It's like how you call for President Trump to be, take responsibility for everything bad that goes in America. Well, Minnesota's like your little mini country. You're in charge. Take responsibility and stop trying to placate everybody's feelings. Like it's very clear who did this. It's the motives seem pretty clear as well. Just say the thing. Say, yeah, this happened on my watch. I'm really disappointed, and I'm going to bring everybody I can to justice.
Well, and I mean, he can't point, he can't look. Okay, let's say, I think that the most recent convictions, which were 59. Of the 59, 51 of them were Somali.
So vast majority. So yeah, it's pretty.
So
it seems pretty appropriate to
you
say.
Can't demonize an entire. Okay, of course they need some assistance.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's just interesting that his concern, first of all, he says that he puts people in jail, okay, after they've been exposed.
Yeah.
Clearly, you are more concerned with not calling. To me, it just seems like he's more concerned with not calling out the community because they're a huge voting bloc. And he doesn't want to be accused of racism. And especially, I mean, think about how he managed Minnesota following George Floyd.
It was on fire.
So now all of a sudden, now you're going to be tough on crime and fraud because you're running for re-election.
Right. And talk about how great of a place it is to live. It's triple bond rated. Like, okay, you can tell people that. Nobody knows what that means. And they just know that your state is mismanaged for the last 5 years. It was on fire for one whole summer. And now there's a huge fraud case. Well, it's not funny, but it's true. And
well, I found this interesting article because remember I've mentioned we've known this for a minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, and he's also, there's this big concern because, he wants the picture here is Trump, Republicans, racist, right?
Yes.
How dare they point out the problem, the obvious issue with this that's happening within the Minnesota Somali community.
How dare you talk about the data?
How dare you notice? Okay.
Yeah.
This article that I want to share, which I know you have not seen, is an opinion piece from the Minnesota Reformer, which is a progressive news outlet, commentary outlet in Minnesota.
Okay.
And this was done July of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
The gentleman that wrote this, what is his exact title? I think he heads up at the DH, like the Minnesota DHS.
He was a fraud investigator for the Minnesota AG. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to share some highlights to this particular article. So one being where he himself is Somali.
Mm-hmm.
And he is talking about the Feed Our Children future fraud is his focus here. But he's acknowledging that fraud is becoming a major issue in Minnesota. And in this particular article, he is calling out his own community.
Yeah.
The Somali community. So he says, our system of Quran, he's talking about the Somali system of Quran, which is a cultural system where it's kind of like how churches will have a fund and they'll gather money together to help people in need. So that's done also within the Somali community. It says, provides a social safety net in the form of financial assistance to those who have fallen on hard times. Unfortunately, it has been used to financially support people who have been charged with defrauding the government. Funds raised by the community have gone towards paying bills and expensive legal bills
No,
incurred by
paying
fraudsters.
bail. Not
Bailing
even
bail,
well,
sorry.
that's even worse.
This assistance from the community has reduced the stigma once associated with criminality and enabled fraudsters to offload onto others the financial costs associated with their crimes.
It's bonkers.
Fraudsters have also sought to exploit the burgeoning political power of the Somali community, and the feckless fear of the establishment politicians and state agencies show when confronted with charges of racism and Islamophobia. So that again aligns with what we've been talking about. Like this whole thing was like, we can't, it's like, I mean, first of all, it is like peak Minnesota nice Democrat,
Yes.
you know, where they don't want to ruffle any feathers. And this isn't a knock on Minnesotans. Like, it's great that Minnesotans are nice and they want to be polite. Like, that's an awesome thing. But when you combine that with like Democrat policies
Yeah.
and
And an
political
election
motivations
hope.
and an election, I think it's kind of a perfect formula to develop a problem, especially if you don't want to be, you know, you're also dealing with a group of people who know, especially considering the climate, that to be called racist is a tool in order for you to keep getting, you know, help, assistance, or not to be questioned.
Yeah.
And he's calling it out right here. Later in the article, he says, during my time at the Office of the Attorney General, I witnessed some members of my community who were under investigation by our office brazenly level false accusations of discrimination against my colleagues. Rather than retain an attorney or argue their case in court, some sought out the Attorney General at public events. Others reached out to Somali elected officials. Members of my community must cease the leveraging of race and religion to avoid accountability, and Minnesota's mostly DFL politicians must better muster the courage to address the systemic fraud in our publicly funded programs. And then, you know, goes off to say, basically, cut it out.
Yes.
We need
Quit
to,
it.
it says, I mean, the last line goes, of course, as long as there are people who possess the desire and opportunity to commit fraud, fraud will occur. And I implore my fellow Somalis to respect the law. So I think at the end of the day, what we're dealing, I think these two stories are interesting because it shows the challenges of immigration, unvetted
Assimilation.
immigration, chain immigration, and also when there isn't assimilation.